So how does a person become a person? It's one of the biggest questions out there, right? Today we're going to get into the classic research that really mapped out that incredible journey of how a human mind gets built from the very first moments of life.
I know, it sounds like a weird riddle, but the answer to this question gets to the very heart of who we are. These aren't just some random objects. They were the tools used in two of the most groundbreaking experiments in psychology ever. So you want to know the answer? Let's dive in.
All right, first things first, we have to tackle this huge question. What are we born with, and what do we have to learn as we go? Are we basically blank slates, or do we arrive with some, pre-installed software?
To figure this out, a researcher named Eleanor Gibson came up with an absolutely brilliant experiment. She wanted to test one very specific thing: depth perception. I mean, think about it. Are you afraid of heights because you took a tumble once, or is that something you were just born with?
The setup is just ingenious. You've got an infant on this checkered surface, right? But part of that surface is actually a thick sheet of glass that covers what looks like a super steep drop, the visual cliff. Then the mother stands on the other side, encouraging the baby to crawl over to her. The big question is simple. Will the baby trust the solid glass under its hands, or will its brain start screaming, "Whoa, danger"?
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. It seems like the key to all of this is age. Researchers discovered that a critical turning point happens right around the 6-month mark. So what happens? Well, the answer is fascinating. Most babies who can crawl will absolutely refuse to cross that cliff. Even with mom calling for them, they'll pat the glass, they might start to cry, but they will not go over that drop-off. So what does that tell us? It suggests that depth perception isn't something we learn the hard way. It's a hardwired survival instinct we are born with. Okay, so we're born with some survival skills already loaded up. But what about our emotional needs? How do we learn to connect with others? Is it really just about who feeds us? That brings us to our next set of experiments, which, believe me, tackle an even more complex question. And that is where psychologist Harry Harlow comes in. He conducted a series of experiments with infant monkeys that became super famous, and for some very good reasons are also really controversial, all to understand the true nature of things like love, comfort, and attachment.
So Harlow took these infant monkeys that had been separated from their real mothers and gave them a choice. He built 2 surrogate mothers. One was made of cold, hard wire, but, and this is key, it had a bottle of milk. The other mother was made of soft, warm terry cloth, but it had no food at all. The question was, what's more important to a baby, food or comfort?
The results were absolutely staggering. They changed psychology forever. The monkeys spent almost all of their time clinging to the soft cloth mother. They'd quickly run over to the wire mother to grab a meal, sure, but then they'd race right back to the comforting one. The conclusion was just undeniable. Contact, that feeling of comfort, was way more powerful than the basic need for food. And listen, this wasn't just about monkeys. A researcher named John Bowlby took these ideas and applied them to us, to humans. He argued that having a strong, early bond with a caregiver is absolutely essential. He theorized that without it, kids can end up with severe emotional problems later on. In fact, he said that if a child doesn't form that secure attachment by the time they're 3 years old, their ability to build healthy relationships as an adult could be damaged for life.
Okay, so we've got innate perception and a fundamental need for comfort. But what about how a child's thinking develops? How do they go from a world that's just pure sensation to a world full of complex ideas? Well, that was the life's work of the legendary Jean Piaget.
For a tiny little baby, the world is a very strange place. Piaget discovered that if you show an infant a toy and then you hide it, the baby doesn't even look for it. For them, if they can't see it or hear it or touch it, it is literally stopped existing. It is truly out of sight, out of mind. But then, usually around 8 months old, something incredible happens. The child's brain makes this huge leap and masters what Piaget called object permanence. Now, when you hide that toy, they'll look for it. They finally understand that things keep existing even when they can't see them. This little cognitive jump, by the way, is the entire reason a game of peekaboo is so much fun.
As their mind keeps developing, kids enter what Piaget called the pre-operational stage. And a really key feature here is something called animism. You probably remember this from when you were little. It's that belief that your stuffed animals have feelings, or that a car with headlights that look like eyes has a personality. It's this tendency to see the world as being alive, just like you.
Another big hallmark of this stage is something called centration. A young child's focus is kind of like a laser pointer. They might see a clown and just get totally fixated on the big red nose, to the point where they can't even process the wig or the face paint or anything else. Their mind just locks onto that one striking feature instead of taking in the whole picture.
So, we've seen all these amazing milestones, but looking at all these pieces of the puzzle brings up a much bigger, almost philosophical question about the puzzle itself. How does all this change actually happen? Is it a slow, steady process, or is it a series of giant leaps?
Let's put it this way. Does a kid's mind grow like a tree, just slowly getting bigger and adding more of the same stuff, like branches and leaves? Or is it more like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly? A complete, total transformation from one stage to a completely different one.
This slide breaks down the two major schools of thought on this. On one side, you have the empiricists. We can call them the tree people. They believe development is quantitative. It's just this continuous piling up of experiences, just adding more branches. But on the other side, you've got the organicists, like Piaget. They're the butterfly people. They see development as qualitative, happening in these distinct stages where the whole way you think completely transforms.
So why do all these classic, old-school theories still matter so much? Well, because they are the foundation for how we understand ourselves today. They connect the dots between our earliest experiences and the adults we become.
Thinkers like Sigmund Freud and Erikson took this idea of stages and ran with it. They both argued that we all move through this series of challenges as we grow up. And the really crucial part of their theories is that you have to resolve the main conflict of one stage before you can successfully move on to the next. If you don't, if you get stuck, you can become fixated, and you end up carrying the unresolved issues from that stage with you for the rest of your life.
And all of this has huge, real-world applications. Bowlby's work on attachment helps us understand why that early parent-child bond is so incredibly critical. Piaget's insights into how kids think totally transformed modern education, showing us that kids learn best by doing, not just by sitting and listening. And of course, these stage theories provide a basic framework for therapy, helping people trace adult problems back to their roots in childhood.
So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one final thought. If you look back at your own life, at your own story, what do you see? Do you see a slow, steady growth, like a tree adding rings year after year? Or do you see a series of big transformations, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly? It's a pretty fascinating way to think about how you became you. Thanks for joining me.